We've got the balanced equation. I told you you've got 1.24 grams of carbon monoxide and 0.873 grams of oxygen. We took those numbers and converted them to moles. That's where all the numbers came from. I'm going to write over here on the left an I. That I stands for initial. That's the number I got from the problem. I told you that. Then I'm going to draw a line. And I'm going to put an F down here. And the F stands for final. Okay, so my final amount. And I'm going to label this middle line with a C. And C stands for change. Let's figure out how much we're changing by. So we've got initial, change, and final. In order to finish this table, the first thing I have to do is figure out the limiting reactant, which we've already done. Okay? We know that CO is the limiting reactant. And that's important because if CO is the limiting reactant, that means I'm going to use all of it. So now I know that down here on the F line, I'm going to have none of it left. So if I start with 0.0443 and I end up with none of it, how much did I use? 0.0443. Right? Now, does it make sense to you guys also that since I'm starting with an amount for each reactant, that I've got to use some of those? So I'm going to subtract here. I'm going to subtract from oxygen. And I'm going to be making product. So I'm going to put a plus on that side. Does that make sense? Subtract from reactants, make to the products. And I started with no CO2. Okay? 0. Now, there's something really neat about this C line, and this only applies to the C line. The numbers that you're going to fill in here on the C line, they've got to go along with the same ratio of the balanced equation. So, see, the balanced equation is 2 to 1 to 2. That means these numbers have to follow that same pattern. Okay? So the one that's easy for me to see is that if CO has a coefficient of 2, and I already know that number is 0.0443, and CO2 has a coefficient of 2, those numbers have to match because 2 is to 2 as 0.0443 is to 0.0443. Agreed? What number is going to go here? Yes. Isn't it going to be 0.02215? How'd you get that?
You divide that number by your coefficient.
You took this number and divided it by 2. How'd you know to divide by 2? Because what do I do to 2 to turn it into 1? I divide it by 2. Therefore, I divide 0.0443 by 2, and it gives me this number. Now, how do I know what goes here? I simply, exactly, I just subtract. What is that going to be? 0.0052. Yeah, I'm going to do 0.0052. I'm going to go ahead and round it. Okay? And I know I've got 0.0443 moles over here. And that's the finished table. Okay?
What happens if they don't, like if 5 and 3 for the coefficients.
Okay, good question. I'm going to write that on here. I'm going to change the number. Here, I'll make it in green. Let's say that this had been 5 and this had been 3, okay? Let's say what he's asking, that this number had been 0.0443. How would I have done that ratio? How would I have gone from 5 to 3, 0.0443 to what? You always multiply where you're going, divide it by where you're coming from. Okay? Now, what we have here, guys, when we set up a table like this and we came up with the 0.0443 moles of CO2, can you convert that to grams? Yeah. How do you convert from moles to grams? Multiply by the molar mass. This 0.0443 moles matches this 1.95 grams we calculated over here. They're the same answer for an amount of CO2. It's just one's in moles and one's in grams. Let's go back to the bread and cheese problem. Here's what I'm starting you with. If you have 4 breads and 3 cheeses, can y'all finish off this table? Maybe we should have done this before we did the other one.
So we're not using the 2 and the 1, we're using the 4.
4 and 3 is what I'm giving you, but you're going to have to use the 2 and the 1 to figure out how to fill in the C line. Where do you start? Guys, you start with, what's the limiting reactant? Bread. Why do you start there? Because if bread's the limiting reactant, you know you're going to use all of it. And then once you have one of those numbers on the C line, you can fill the rest of them in because they follow the ratio. So what number goes here? Two. What number goes over here on the sandwich? 2. Why? Is 2, 1, 1 not the same as 4, 2, 2? It's the same ratio. And that's that table finished out.